Autistic people often struggle with communication at work. But why? Join me as I count down the top 8 reasons why high-masking autistics struggle at work. First on the list at number 8 is difficulty understanding ambiguous language. Get that done later. I'll be back soon. Finish it before the end of the week. Now, that last one might sound clear to you, but it's just as vague as the others if you're talking to someone on Monday. Before the end of the week, is that Thursday or is that Friday? Is that Friday at 1 minute before the end of the workday? Is your end of the week Saturday, like on a calendar, or Friday? Just say what you want. Date, time, done. So that example is about deadlines, but vague or ambiguous language floats around frequently at the workplace. And I'm not on a mission to change all of that, but it's important to know that it leads to miscommunications. And maybe 4 out of 5 know what you want and will do it. Maybe they won't, but that 5th person might have a different interpretation because it's ambiguous. Then, if they're autistic, they might ask questions.
I got a question. Can you organize all of these templates into different cells?
But you might think they're asking as an indirect way of showing that they don't want to do it. But newsflash, asking questions for someone autistic is usually not a passive-aggressive way to say they don't want to do it. It's their way of making sense of something that doesn't make sense right now. They also might not even ask, because last time they did, they read your thinly veiled annoyance. And even though they don't totally understand why you were annoyed, especially after telling them, hey, you can always ask me questions, they don't want to get that reaction again. Doesn't mean they get it. Just means they're willing to risk it and just guess. And there are so many reasons why that I'll talk about soon. But the point is, what's clear for you might not be clear for your listener, especially if it's ambiguous and they're autistic. Number 7, being misunderstood, especially with literal versus implied meanings. Being misunderstood happens both in face-to-face communication and written communication, like emails or texts. And a lot of the time, people assume what was meant rather than asking for clarification, which can get us into some trouble. An example is when people write things in emails or messages, but there's very little context. A lot of people make assumptions and read into it. Oh, he sounds upset, or okay, she's frustrated right now, or just, geez, the way he worded that is really, really rude. I've been on both sides of it, especially before I knew I was autistic. I couldn't figure out why other people always guessed wrong about my intentions when I am very literal, and in my mind, very clear. I'm saying exactly what I mean. But I also have read people's messages and took them literally, but they don't really mean it. What's going on here, people? So this being misunderstood can be challenging and frustrating. But before I was diagnosed, I couldn't understand why I seemed to be the only one who was misunderstood. Why don't people just say what they mean? It would be so much easier that way. But until then, me and many other high-masking autistics will have to know that we will be misunderstood often, even with our best efforts to be clear. Number 6, being blunt or too direct. Autistic people, especially when not masking, often communicate directly. I mean, directly. We don't beat around the bush. We get to it. If I'm at A and I need to B, we draw a straight line. We don't do any of this A to B. Bam! Hello, I'm here. Unfortunately, being direct or blunt can get you labeled as rude in many Western cultures, even if it's more efficient and concise. So many high-masking autistic people try to adapt. We might try to say things less forcefully or directly, but in the process, things can get a little confusing. Maybe our meaning gets lost, and then, oops, now I'm misunderstood. Again. Should have just been more direct. Let me try again. Oh no, now they look jolted. Okay, a bit too concise. What's the perfect amount of being direct, but not too direct? Concise, but not too blunt. Makes my brain feel tired. It makes me want this interaction to be over and to not repeat it again for a while. How about we not play this game anymore? Holy moly, man. Look at my arms go. What's happening here, people? Feeling a little bit shy. The point is, I often have contributions to share. I have lots of ideas, basically all the time. But if the natural way of communicating for me gets me in trouble, it's a roadblock to me being able to participate in discussions, which, as we talked about in number 1, is already hard enough due to neurological and communication differences of autistic and non-autistic brains. So for me and a lot of other autistic people, we're not being rude or trying to make you uncomfortable with our directness. We're just trying to communicate clearly in ways that make sense to our brains. Number 5, volume or tone issues. Again, volume and tone seem to be judged constantly because people assume everyone can control their volume or tone. And yes, autistic people can control these things, especially when we're really focusing on them. But the volume and tone I use as an autistic person doesn't always mean the same thing that other people assume they mean. When I'm loud, it doesn't always mean that I'm angry or upset. And it's kind of weird because I'm pretty sensitive to the volume and tone of other people, but sometimes I don't even notice that I'm loud. So a lot of people interpret that my volume or tone somehow shows what I feel, but unfortunately, it doesn't always match up. Just like speaking quietly doesn't necessarily mean I'm not confident or that I'm unsure of myself. And tone doesn't always indicate what we feel. Sometimes I don't even know how I feel when I'm talking. I'm not really thinking about my volume or tone because doing that would distract me from what I'm saying. It's extra noise for my autistic brain. So if I'm loud or I sound stern or harsh, don't overinterpret it. I'm usually not upset or frustrated. I'm just talking. But issues can arise for autistic people when other people assume what we're saying indirectly through our volume or tone by overanalyzing the way we said something. It might not align with our words, but it feels like people sometimes aren't actually even really listening to what we're saying because they are mostly focused on the way we say it. And that can make communication with people at work a real struggle. Number 4, facial expressions are misjudged. Same as volume and tone. My face might look blank or not very excited, but I could be really excited. That just hasn't made it to my face yet. That's because facial expressions are another thing I need to monitor while communicating. And that's one extra thing that my busy brain doesn't always register when I'm talking. So sometimes I'm furrowing my brows. Debbie tells me that I sometimes look irritated or that I'm frowning. And I don't even realize it. That's just how my face looks sometimes. It's also how I look when I'm thinking or concentrating hard. Sometimes it's tricky when you have to concentrate really hard. And it's also the low-key irritation on my face when my thinking is interrupted. But that's only part of the picture. 1 in 5 autistic people have alexithymia, including me, which means that we struggle not only with identifying our feelings, but also with describing them. So what does that have to do with communication at work? The facial expressions of many autistic people are constantly misinterpreted, just like the meaning of the words we say, just like our volume and our tone and our faces. Here's the deal. My brain and face do not communicate with each other well. Sometimes they don't even communicate at all. My brain will do one thing and my face will confidently do the complete opposite. I'm still in the process of working this whole thing out, but as of now, I have little say in the matter. It does what it does. And quite honestly, it makes me feel a little bit shy. Here's something interesting that happened to me recently. A colleague approached me and told me that another colleague was worried that I was upset with her. By itself, not really a big deal. But what made this shocking to me was a combination of 3 things. First, I was not at all upset with this particular colleague and couldn't think of any reason why she would think I was. Second, we don't really work together at all. I mean, different locations, different schedules, different responsibilities, different teams, which brings me to my third point. I never see her at work. She works at a branch I never go to, so I never even talk with her. I never have any reasons to talk with her. We have a relatively large staff, and there's quite a few individuals that I just don't talk with much. Not a big deal. So then why would this particular colleague think I was upset with her? You're not going to believe this. And here's why. On that particular Friday, I had left my apartment and was out for a walk. This is a walk that I do often, so I know the route really well, and I didn't have my glasses on. During my walk, I apparently was spotted by my colleague, and she waved to me. I was across the street and far enough away where I couldn't see her without my glasses. So to provide herself with more evidence that I was upset with her, my face was apparently stern. And I wouldn't argue with her on this point. But the reason my face looks stern is because that's how my face looks when I'm deep in thought. When I go for these walks, it's to do some serious thinking and get organized in my brain. My stern face is a byproduct of that. And although it might have bothered a particular colleague of mine, it sure as heck doesn't bother me in the least bit. So, 1, she assumed I was feeling something, anger or irritation, because of my face. 2, she also assumed it was directed at her because she didn't know I was zoning out, and she thought I was looking at her. And 3, she didn't ask me about it. She assumed, basically the worst, about what was happening. The only way it got cleared up was that it bothered her enough to bring it up to someone else. Lucky for me, I was in a leadership position at that time. I didn't get a warning from HR or anything like that. Just another colleague telling me that my face scared someone. Okay, got it. But I've had times when I got in trouble at work for things like this, and I had never understood why. Now, I look back at those through the understanding of my autism, and it bothers me that all these assumptions are being made all the time. Just ask me. I'll tell you. bluntly and honestly if I'm upset or feeling any particular way. But usually I'm not. But it's a lot better than guessing wrong. And it seems like a lot of the time, the autistic person ends up being the one that gets blamed in these situations. Number 3, assuming that you're keeping up with the conversation. Conversations are so hard, especially when it involves more than one person. I'll talk about that in the next section too, but having a conversation that is more than one-on-one is often hard for me and for many autistics because of all the social nuances. How much time do I look at each person? When is it my turn to talk? Can I leave if I'm done, or do I need to wait until they both end the conversation too? And why does the topic keep changing? Wait, there's that weird smell coming from down the hall. Oh, wait, she just said something about London. And now that I'm thinking about London, that smell, it's kind of like in London where they have those fresh roasted nuts. I think they're sweetened pecans, but God, I love those things. They come out during Christmas time, and I love Christmas in London. Absolutely love it. I really, really want those little cups of sweetened pecans. Crap. Focus on the conversation. How long have I been distracted? What have I missed? Shit, why is everyone looking at me now? Every single person. This is how conversations happen all the time. It's a lot for my autistic brain to keep up with, and it makes me tired and a little bit cranky. Number 2, we're often masking, especially at work. I don't know a lot of autistic people yet who start a job and tell everyone they're autistic. Maybe over time, this will change with better understanding of autistic people. But as it currently stands, a lot of autistic people are high masking because we've learned to do that. But it's extremely tiring. I have other videos on that specifically, but just know that masking impacts our communication too. Especially during periods of burnout when we still have to go to work for a living and are trying our best, but everything is just so freaking hard. Number 1, keeping up energy levels is hard enough at work. Interactions are okay sometimes, but they can also drain energy quickly. The challenges of being autistic that happen outside of work, like sleep issues, food sensitivities, sensitivity to sensory stimuli. Jeez, that was a mouthful. These all build too. High masking autistics often feel pressure to be consistent with energy levels, but that's not the reality of our lives. We don't feel good when we get up for work every day. Then we're barraged by tons of other things. Noises, lights, smells, all before we even get into our workplace, especially if we have to commute. We are often completely drained before we even start our workday. So the added pressure to look excited or chipper when we don't feel that way is something we often do, but it's also really, really exhausting. And then when communication happens, it's hard. Okay, so now that we have 8 areas that identify why high masking autistics struggle in the workplace, let's dive deeper into how these challenges look in the workplace. Difficulties participating in group conversations, meaning talks with more than one other person. This can mean looking awkward, not being able to figure out when to talk without interrupting and before the conversation moves on. Maintaining the right body proximity when talking. And then processing time. People talk quickly, and it's hard to keep up sometimes. Autistic people, we often miss what was said. Something gets said, and that's what the autistic person keeps thinking about or leads to another thought. Here's the thing. Often when an autistic person hears something, they need to unpack it. What that unpacking looks like is the autistic person thinking about every possible meaning or every possible outcome. This can obviously take a while, but until the autistic person actually unpacks what was said, they aren't going to be able to listen to anything coming afterwards. This happens to me pretty often. Someone will say something, and before I've had time to completely process what was said, they're moving right along to the next sentence, and then another, and then another. Rapid fire. It doesn't take long before I absolutely have no idea what's going on. While my brain was unpacking, I wasn't listening. My brain switched gears. Without my permission, I might add. It does that sometimes. Quite honestly. All the freaking time, actually. I also just find other people to be really unclear communicators to me. All those words, mumbo jumbo, words. I have a hard time sifting through it all and hearing the point. My mind keeps repeating the phrase, "What's your point? What's your point?" I might not always be saying it out loud, but I'm thinking about it a lot. So get to the point. Being labeled difficult or rude, like we talked about earlier. Face, tone, volume, word choice while keeping up with a conversation that moves way too fast for my autistic brain, and then not asking for clarification or giving me the benefit of the doubt. These often lead to me being labeled as rude or stubborn or difficult when I ask extra questions or don't do that thing you just spent 20 minutes talking about because I didn't even know what you were talking about. Or when you want me to do something, but don't say when or make it clear that it's up to me to do. Vague wording like, maybe you could do that thing a little bit later if you want. So to me, that sounds like it's unsure that we even might want to do something. And if it's something, if I want and I don't want, then I won't do it because you didn't actually ask me to. Now, if you would have said, it's important, so finish it by the end of the day tomorrow, then I know it's important. Do it now. I've also been labeled difficult when I have brought problems to the attention of people who I think would want to know, like colleagues who weren't pulling their weight with a project or are coming into work consistently late. I've learned over time that it's often not appreciated to be honest about things like that, even though it seems it would be relevant to the company. And sometimes that's hard to swallow. Looking the other way when things aren't done right at work. Challenges, self-advocating. So all of these issues often make it hard for autistic people to grow in the workplace. They might get passed up for promotions, or they might have a hard time asking for them due to being aware of all of these challenges. It's also common for autistic people to get disciplined or even fired for the issues mentioned earlier. So for all of these reasons and more, the workplace can be a challenging place for autistic people, especially when it comes to communication. So in conclusion, autistic people often struggle with communication at work because of dealing with ambiguous or unclear language, being misunderstood, especially with literal versus implied meanings, being blunt or too direct, having issues with volume or tone, having facial expressions that are misjudged, assuming that we're keeping up with the conversation. We're often masking, especially at work, and that's pretty tiring. This makes it challenging to keep up energy levels at work. There you have it. Thanks for watching. How about we not play this game anymore? Holy moly, man. The point is, I often have contributions. Crap. Focus on the conversation.